fiery dawn finds a complex new mission beginning. As the rediscovery of the world lures Calypso to Cuba, the Caribbean's most intriguing island. A team led by Jean-Michel and Jacques Cousteau unveils a Cuba few outsiders have seen, a land a Cuban poet called a long green crocodile reclining in the sun. A pristine underwater landscape beckons Cousteau to waters teeming with life. A rare abundance of fish in lush coral jungles, deep water phantoms playing with men, a sea brimming with wealth, and yet a land trapped in dependence on vulnerable crops. The king, sugar. A fragile economy where a wild tropical storm spells disaster, and industry spurs the familiar cortege of pollution. Still, the Cuban people persist with goodwill and good humor. Many colors, many smiles. People for whom work is a way of living, but music a way of life. Motivated by both dance and national defense. The sea shaped Cuba's destiny and the present paradox, scant miles from a towering neighbor and its ways, yet embracing more distant forces, painting politics with a human face. Rich in Afro-Latin heritage and surprising conversations.
In all the world, Fidel Castro is represented as a big cigar.
En todo el mundo se representa a Fidel Castro con un gran tabaco.
Alors, I arrive here, and I see Fidel Castro with no cigar.
Resulta que llego yo aquí y me encuentro que Fidel Castro no tiene tabaco por ninguna
La grande
parte.
decepción.
La excepción, tengo honor de la excepción.
Mucha propaganda los puros cubanos.
It is true that I used to greatly promote Cuban cigars.
Puede ser que me convenga a mí, pero
It was good for the economy, but not so good for my health.
But not so much for myself.
There would be many dives, and with each, the explorers returned, dazzled by the magic of life underwater, as if never beholding it before. For 2 months, the team would savor the clear waters of Cuba.
Si ça restait d'autres poissons, c'était moins joli, hein. Ces reflets, argentés là.
The voyage begins with a light bird off the lush hills, as the Cousteau plane joins the Calypso for a unique survey of an island long secluded, unknown to many, traveled by few. Drawn by the mystery of the Cuban landscape, Cousteau sets out first to observe from above. Commanding modern tools of rediscovery, Cousteau will fly all around Cuba, a journey rarely made by visitors before. Cousteau and pilot Michael Sullivan float in a sky free of clouds. Below, the powerful haunches of the largest island in the Caribbean, the poet's winding green crocodile with eyes of stone and water. A moist tropical garden with royal palms gracing the rolling hills. A fragrant island, rich in woods, fruit, and flower. Frequent refuge for the myriad creatures of nature. A zigzag line pressed with countless coves, the long coast of Cuba fooled Christopher Columbus, who believed he had reached a peninsula of Asia. A ship's replica marks his landfall in 1492, when he claimed Cuba a colony for Spain. Columbus also brought to Cuba the universal sweet sugar, now a green sea of cane, the mainstay of Cuba's economy almost 5 centuries after the first flower of harvest. On this sugar and slave foundation, Spain built great coastal cities, now ringed and clouded by industry, but blessed by nearly perfect harbors, which make Cuba's trade with the outside world possible. Cousteau's survey reveals Cuba not as one island, but hundreds, a necklace of tiny cayos, marshes, and shallows. A water nursery for an extravagance of life barely surviving now on neighboring Caribbean islands. In the gleaming swamps, rare sea crocodiles easily stalk prey through liquid fields so clear no school of fish can hide. Here too at the mangrove roots dwell the microorganisms on which the larger species feed. In the rich coastal ocean, a fish trap need only stand in place to reap a harvest. The taut skin of the sea frequently breaks into a shimmer of feeding fish, or displays the fancy dress tuxedo cape of the manta ray. Cousteau delights in the exuberance of the Cuban seas and in the crowning sight of familiar friends, dolphins gliding through the green-blue water. Calypso rolls lightly in what seems a virginal paradise of ocean life, and sets a steady course to better probe the riches Captain Cousteau spotted from the air. The team deploys the side-scan sonar. Engineer Guy Jouas soon notes what could be just a rock or a lost ship wrecked on the ocean bottom. Eager to learn the true source of the sonar signal, Captain Albert Falco anchors Calypso while the team prepares to dive.
My first dive in the waters of Cuba serves as a moment of truth. We glide freely over an exuberant garden of living horn and stone. A motley crowd of colorful creatures swarms among tall trees like dwarf bonsais. As our lights brush a flowing stream of young barjacks, I realize that here, youthful life is left alone to thrive. I find myself slipping ahead, drawn to the more solitary sanctuary of the shipwreck we suspected from above. Like a beacon in the dark of the sea, a huge lone grouper easily takes the peak of the overturned ferry boat. The undisputed landlord of a magnificent private estate. Borne to the silent mansion, my pilot smoothly travels the slope of the rooftop gate. With a single flurry and sign, he beckons me enter. At home at once, I follow as the usher stays always in sight, a moving being. He could almost patch the broken metal, dressed in the yellow and red of the rusting hull. Both camouflage keeper and congenial guide, patiently waiting when we drag along. Our venerable escort graciously does the honors, granting the bubble-blowing strangers a visit to his crumbling castle. A tour of the ceiling, a slip through a secret door, a stop at a porthole where it is made sure I am not lost. Lured by our Minotaur, we penetrate deeper into this three-dimensional labyrinth. Then, as we safely near the exit, the grouper sees me out, the perfect host.
The Caribbean and the Atlantic both wash the shores of Cuba, a mystical union which beguiled the legendary writer Ernest Hemingway.
En el año 1925, esa fue la primera vez que yo lo conocí a Hemingway. Después lo vinimos a ver.
Gregorio Fuentes skippered Hemingway's yacht for over 20 years. Hemingway loved Cuba, finding both home and inspiration there for his epic tale, The Old Man and the Sea.
Toda la isla, recorrer todo el Atlántico, todo esto.
Gregorio recounts how he and Hemingway made countless voyages around the Cuban coast. In fact, Gregorio explains, we spent so much time together, our personalities fused. He told me I was Hemingway, and he Gregorio.
Gregorio era Hemingway y él era Gregorio también. Así que es lo mismo. Dice, este es el verdadero amigo.
Each day, Gregorio recalls the memory of Hemingway and their special lasting friendship, born of their bonds to the sea they shared. Another veteran of the sea gathers his friends as Calypso seeks clues to the vitality of Cuba's liquid realm.
With each dive, the sea renews its secrets, posing a fresh riddle, revealing yet another irony. Here, I dive in order to rise. Up and over the breach of a coral canyon, onto the reef, a living catalogue of tropical creatures. A green moray barks but does not bite, choosing retreat more often than attack. Surrounding me, large fish among flourishing coral, a reef more rich than any I have seen in years. A melting pot of species swimming freely among each other. The transparent water sharpens color. The blue tang glow like fresh ink on the elkhorn coral. A stingray flutters, a sandy leaf in a breeze. Diving biologist François Sarano follows a puzzling gathering of fish, seemingly aimed irresistibly ahead. He soon spots a hand of coral, the sign of a cleaning station. Here, dozens of customers wait the services of the tiny yellow hogfish that, like barbers, dart from client to client, grooming, nipping, gently pecking any parasites and damaged tissue from the larger fish. The clients present either head or tail, depending on what is bothering them. Grunts, jacks, and other species mix in line patiently, as if on a busy day at the local car wash.
The team takes a closer look as another even tinier cleaner, the Labroides, goes to work. The cleaner browses. The customer obliges. The cleaner receives unlimited permission to roam, removing annoyances and finding food for itself. A mutual service contract rendered by nature.
Maybe we will have to bring the drinking water from land.
Captain Cousteau discusses the balance of nature in Cuba with President Fidel Castro.
En el año 59, cuando triunfa la revolución,
In 1959,
había muchas especies que estaban casi agotadas.
many species had practically disappeared, including the manatee.
Los cocodrilos estaban casi agotados también.
There were almost no crocodiles.
Eso fue lo que inspiró la idea de hacer un criadero
of
de
creating
cocodrilo
a
aquí.
breeding place for the crocodiles.
Se recogieron de distintos
They
lugares
were caught from different
y estos
places
sí se multiplicaron en
and they
cautiverio.
did reproduce in captivity.
The freshwater Cuban crocodile, prized for its patterned skin, is no longer an endangered species, thanks to the breeding program. Its commercial use is now well managed. Hunting is forbidden, and young crocodiles find the living easy, since their every need is met. Sea turtles, severely endangered around the world, also find protection in various hatcheries in Cuba. In the catching of fish, it seems Cuba also tries to avoid damage, using a system of wooden traps that collect fish as they swim. The grassy ocean bottom remains unscarred by scraping trawl nets. Here, instead, fish come to the trap and not the other way around. Fish, once caught, stay alive in these underwater corrals. Huge schools of grunts and other species swarm and continue to feed, but they do not die wastefully tangled in nets and can be released by fishermen who keep only the large and edible fish. Some fish, of course, can and do escape. There is little chance of leaving for the strange batfish. The creature more flies than swims, then lands like a bird on the ocean floor. Its knobby head is solid bone. Under its beak, a retractable lure to bait prey. The ocean diversity here intrigues biologist Serrano, who makes notes during a rare, quiet moment on Calypso. As night melts into warm, early morning, the familiar breakfast ritual between a team of friends begins again. On the bridge, though, the calm doesn't last long. Albert Falco's practiced eyes spot a frantic flapping on the distant ocean's surface. Knowing such a frenzy must mean an enormous concentration of fish, he directs Christian Belfond to maneuver closer and quickly heads aloft to get a better view. Below, his instinct is confirmed. A huge patch in the sea with a shadowy, dark form barely visible at its heart. Falco urgently radios the ship.
Reçu, je préviens les plongeurs. Plongeurs...
No time is lost, no diver unneeded. Calypso and the Zodiac race to the boiling patch, for this can be no ordinary gathering. A vast school of bonito tuna feeds madly on tightly grouped anchovies and other small fish, tearing the sea into foam in an ever wilder banquet. But now the shadow is revealed. A giant whale shark feeds not on bonito, but with them at the center of the table. This creature can reach 50 feet and is rarely seen feeding at the surface, the gray-brown hub of the frenzy. Cousteau divers are first to film the strange vertical feast of this elusive titan. The whale shark feeds in gulps sometimes 4 feet wide. By sinking just enough, the shark need only let fish and tiny plankton wash into its mouth, then strain out seawater through its gills. The largest fish in the sea sustained, even piloted, by the smallest.
Our divers approach gingerly, apprentices to a supple master. There is no hostile response. For the shark, enemy of no man, its giant gulp, now a simple slit, is not a threat. Though huge, it is known in Cuba as pez dama, or gentle one. Eventually, the steed twists away, diving sleekly to its usual deepwater home beyond our reach. Giving up reluctantly, the team leaves an unforgettable champagne in the other universe of the sea.
Calypso approaches Havana, Cuba's sprawling coastal capital founded in the 16th century, protected by an excellent harbor which favored great wealth and commerce under Spain. A critical port for merchant ships and today's patrons of Cuba's trade. The harbor curves along the half-circle of the old Spanish town, once aristocratic, now merely the cultural foundation of an entirely different arrangement of society.
What you're working for
Aquello por lo que usted trabaja
is the happiness of your people.
es la felicidad de su pueblo.
Huh? But I also have the impression
Sin embargo, también tengo la impresión
that you think that the only good way for happiness
que
is
usted
the way
piensa que la única forma de
you
llegar a esa
think.
felicidad es la forma en que usted la concibe.
But it reminds me of Ford,
Pero me recuerda a mí,
who made his first cars and said, you can choose any color you wish provided that it's black. Sorry, but
Estoy absolutamente convencido de que la
The
forma
president
que nosotros
replies,
estamos haciendo es la mejor,
I am
la más
absolutely
útil, la más
convinced that
adecuada
the
para
system
nuestro
we are
pueblo.
using is the most adequate for our
Los
people.
niveles de ignorancia, de
when you consider the ignorance and poverty we surmounted. But I am not the best to testify to this. The best witness is the people. The people work a lot, sometimes with youthful spirit, sometimes free for the state. As on Red Sunday, when work is redefined as a duty, a privilege, but work just the same. In small tobacco factories around Cuba, many hands work to produce the celebrated Cuban cigar, rolled to perfection from a humble brown leaf of the countryside, and never, it seems, more than a puff away. An expert can fingertip 14 cigars an hour, each a simple sculpture, each a statement by its maker. The land provides another crop of traditional work. With machete and muscle as for centuries, Cubans hack and harvest sugarcane, back-breaking work made to look easy, a ballet for the hands. In the fields the Cubans call El Campo, cutting sugar means more than export earned. Sugar forms part of a national fate determined by nature. Nature, too, writes history, and Havana's sacred silk cotton tree each year summons the faithful, the superstitious, the expectant, in a strange ritual of wish and symbol to mark the city's founding and its first Catholic Mass. City fathers parade the votive cup and silver seal, while crowds press ever closer to the towering tree. Once the point from which all distances were measured, today the tree serves magic, a touchstone for dreams. Sometimes waiting their chance all night, citizens circle 3 times for health, the city, and their own fortune. Money tossed could bring love, an automobile, relief from worry, or any other cause for celebration. But finally, the soul of Cuba lives by music. In streets swollen with people aching to dance or simply to play a familiar game among friends, the Cuban national memory thrives on Spanish ballad and African pulse. Too evoke the incessant pace of the economy, turning now to new rhythms of the sea. Cuba exports thousands of tons of spiny lobster, a new cash crop, using innovative methods to successfully increase the catch without depleting the stock. The Cousteau team learns the lobster industry has national priority, attracting young scientists to apply their training to the real conditions of the ocean. One biologist describes the nursery system, artificial shelters placed in the wild where juvenile lobster easily find them. Unusual undersea housing is scattered in zones closed to fishing, to ward off predators so the vulnerable young can grow. Safe in their curved, dark homes, the growing creatures leave only to forage and scavenge for morsels of food, using their sharp whip antennae to sense their way out and back. Once a lobster reaches 9 inches in length, it may be legally caught and sold to a world eager for the delicacy. Box traps set in the fishing area rise to a fleet of ships forbidden to catch too much or too often in any given quadrant of the sea. Sailing a sea of wise harvest, Oswaldo Contino explains the key point. No lobster fishing in March, April, and May, the reproduction season.
To have a good environment, is it necessary to have a strong authority?
Yo pienso pues que me pregunto si para tener un buen medio ambiente se requiere que exista una autoridad competente.
Bueno, yo pienso que hacen falta autoridades.
I think it is necessary to have a consciousness of the problem.
Que estén conscientes del problema. No pienso que sea tan necesaria la autoridad en el sentido de fuerza.
Not authority in the sense of force,
creo que hace falta una política,
but a policy of persuasion of the people and regulations, because in this sense the Cubans are not always very well disciplined. Cuba's lobster catch continues to rise, one of the few in the world to enjoy such success, based, it seems, on long-term ideas. The more lobster caught wisely, the more lobster remain to catch. The more jobs for fishermen, the more money earned. A growing role for lobster in the chain of production, the need for production being almost a national refrain. President Castro tells Captain Cousteau about a record-breaking genetically superior cow specially bred in Cuba.
2 kilograms of milk.
En 244 días, 682 kilogramos de grasa.
Cousteau compares the cow to a famous coal. Yes, agrees the president, this cow took all records.
La máxima producción en 3 ordeños.
Because the top production in one day
110,9
in 3 milking was 110 liters of milk.
Una cosa realmente, los campesinos
So
no querían
really,
creer.
tremendous. The farmers did not want to believe it.
Invitamos periodistas
We had to invite
internacionales
international journalists.
Hacer la primera vaca.
In fact, the cow is so famous, a monument will be erected to
Si le
her.
hacen estatua a los guerreros,
Because if they raise statues to the warriors,
¿por qué no hacer una estatua
why
a una vaca que
not
producía
make
leche
out
para una
that
escuela
produced
completa?
milk for a whole school?
Some production statistics, of course, remain on the hoof. And some workers of the tropical range find rest near the sea, pondering the strange work of their visitors. Locked in hopeless combat with the sky, the rusted skull of a Spanish gunship bears mute witness to mad events of war, one of many ships embroiled, now broken, in the ocean shallows. At Santiago de Cuba, a silent Spanish fort guards the narrow neck of the bay and protects the ghosts of a great naval battle fought between Spain and the United States along the Cuban coast.
3 de julio de 1898.
Historian Dr. Amado Martinez tells Cousteau that in 1898, during the Spanish-American War, the snug harbor became a death trap for the Spanish fleet, blockaded by the Americans. The Spanish admiral sailed out to the open sea, a fatal error. The Americans formed a semicircle out here, and by 11 in the morning, the Spaniards had been completely destroyed, picked off one by one. A single ship escaped briefly to the west, the 7,000-ton armored cruiser Cristobal Colon. Still standing upright, the piercing ram of the Colon today threatens no one. Cousteau and the divers cling like figureheads on a rusting wedge of history.
Travelers across the barriers of time, we float above a smothered chimney that fueled Cologne in a race for life that could not be won. Outchased, heavy, Cologne succumbed. With apprehension, we slip into the dim metal maze, but as we drift downward, glinting magic transforms this haunted wreck of battle, a warship, now a treasure ship of shining coins. Stately tarpon, an invasion of glittering tarpon, at home in the rusting locker. We press into the deepest holds, lost in a hall of tarpon mirrors, swirling as if poured from molten silver and gold. We followed the tarpon flowing skyward, back toward the light. As we rise, the irony remains. A silent wreck, the source of exploration between men, also symbolizes bitterness between two nations. With the defeat of Spain in 1898, the United States secured a naval base in Cuba, still used today. When Calypso arrived in Cuba,
Cuando el Calipso llegó a Cuba,
our ship passed in front of Guantanamo.
pasó antes por frente de Guantánamo.
And in Guantanamo, there is an American naval base.
After the Spanish-American War, the United States leased the base from Cuba for an unlimited period of time, an agreement the present Cuban government does not recognize as valid.
Now, in any case, I suppose that the original treaty provides for payments.
Yes, the president explains, the United States worked out, as with an occupied country, an agreement by which we had to surrender a piece of our territory for a determined amount of money. But for more than 20 years, Cuba has refused to cash those checks, and I have some of them here in this desk.
En esta gaveta tengo algunos de ellos. Hace tiempo que no los veo.
You mean these are the checks from the American government?
Sí, estos son cheques del gobierno norteamericano. Sí, por Guantánamo.
Tresorio General de la República de Cuba.
Quiero ver la cantidad de dinero. Estos cheques yo nunca los he manejado.
Is that every month or every...
¿Era mensual o...?
Yo creo que esto es anual.
I think it is every year.
$85.
It's $4,085.
Además, esta base no tiene ninguna utilidad militar.
And besides, that base has no strategic value. It has nothing to do with the security of the United States. It is just a way of humiliating our country.
No, humiliation, bon, maybe. But there is also another possibility.
Pudiera ser, pero hay otra posibilidad.
What do you think if this was only a reaction against the implementation of Soviets in Cuba?
If the United States doesn't like our relations with the Soviets, that still doesn't mean they have a right to occupy a piece of our territory. On one side, Cuba, then a barren no-man's land of thick bramble and dry salt marsh, planted with rolls of barbed wire and the mines of two nations, the largest minefield in the world. Escorted by Cuban officials, Captain Cousteau makes his way through the strange outdoor tunnel, a stateless, narrow corridor leading from Cuba to the sea and the gate, beyond which lies the Guantanamo base, controlled by the United States. Both governments allow a dwindling group of Cubans to commute to work at the base until they retire. Each day, as for decades, the workers exchange their Cuban identity cards for American ones. Cousteau quietly shatters base routine, joining the workers, the first non-Cuban to cross from Cuba into the base since 1961, when diplomatic relations with the United States ended.
Welcome to Guantanamo. Thank you. How are you today?
Once a career Navy officer himself, Cousteau talks with base commander Captain John R. Condon.
Captain, when I talked to Fidel Castro, of course, Guantanamo came as a very strong issue. Among his arguments, one of them is that this base has, that's what he says, no strategic utility. And it's just a way for the Americans to humiliate Cuba. That's his argument. Militarily, he says it's no value whatsoever. But I suppose that the Navy has another point of view.
Oh yes, the Navy, our primary purpose here, and you will see it as you go around the base today and talk to people, is to train the fleet.
And there's no offensive equipment here?
None to speak of, no sir. No, it's essentially defensive, to provide for our own internal security and that type of thing.
And the Cubans do not maintain offensive weapons around either?
No, they have a defensive organization over there, and we watch for any changes, and I'm sure they watch us for any changes.
The constant scanning detects only rolling desert at the base of low hills, which naturally trap rain on the Cuban side, and the green, deep harbor, one of the best in the world. Town offers a transplant of Main Street, with all daily rhythms imported from home. Isolated within an island on an island, children and their parents thread their lives in a foreign place with familiar rituals and all-American amusements.
Come on, Rich, take him away.
In the shadow of guns afloat, Cousteau considers the stalemate of Guantanamo, a vestige of history frozen in the present.
You know, Captain, I'm very impressed by the hospitality of this Guantanamo base, which is a small American town. And I cannot help wondering why there are disputes between the Cubans and the Americans. Because my point of view is the point of view of a diver, and more or less the point of view of fish. Fish have their problems too. Their raw motivations, safeguarding their territory, attack and defense, the quest for food, the drive to perpetuate, all govern every single facet of their behavior. Citizen of two worlds, theirs and ours, I had hoped, all along my journey through life, that humans would finally rise above instincts to achieve a borderless harmony.
Captain Cousteau and President Castro make a tour through the Havana Botanic Garden and visit a high school where students greet the familiar leader and the familiar visitor. The president asks whether the students recognize their guest. They do. Let's see if you know the ship where he works, the president says. Again, they know.
I am moved by such welcome. Before me, the glowing faces of the most precious resource of any nation, its youth. School children head home. They live in a world that did not divide. For them, two halves reduced to the language they study. The seventh grader explains. School offers courses in Russian and English.
Porque hay dos idiomas en la escuela. Y si a uno le gusta, uno escoge el idioma que quiere. Y si, por ejemplo,
you choose the one you like.
Le gusta el ruso, lo ponen una que es de ruso. Si le gusta el inglés, le da inglés.
A young boy counts to 10 in Russian.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 y 10.
His counterparts took English, stumped as to why.
Es interesante.
¿Tú puedes darme los números en inglés, por favor?
But they also count to please us.
Empiezo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Language is a tool for dreaming, a window on other ways of life. Finally, it is for children free of animosity to discover they are both members of their country and citizens of a world as eternal as the sea around them.